Ben Curtis missed 103 days in his first 2 years in office.
The county commissioners have mishandled funds.
And the commissioners and the Republican Party have been attacking our Board of Elections since at least March of 2019.
I'm Ann Brady.
And I'm Wally White. And these are the rumors that have been going around on social media. And we want to take the time to separate it all out. And we're putting up a link. Everything that we're going to talk to you about, Ann and I have done public information requests on. And we've got a lot of paper. It's a lot of paper. But we put it in a Google document drive in a folder. And you can take the link and go read all of it yourself. So we're going to just hit some of it. We can't even cover all of it because we're only going to do this in a 15-minute podcast right now. So Ann, how about you tell us how this all started? Because I came in later on. You started before me.
I got very frustrated when I felt like the county commissioners in the Republican Party were bullying the Board of Elections. And as I started looking into it, somebody from the Republican Party came forward with some information, and it just looked like there was a real discrepancy between how the Register of Deeds was being treated and the Board of Elections. So that spearheaded me collecting data, and you joined me.
Right. And so when we started going into it, we were, like you just said, looking at the Board of Elections. And then the more you dug into this thing, it just got deeper and deeper. Then we looked at what the commissioners had done with the raises for Ben Curtis for the Register of Deeds. And then it was even beyond that into Ben's absenteeism in work. And so that's the research that we started really looking into. I'm moving my hands because I realized I forgot to mute my phone and I don't want to interrupt it. So,
you start by talking about Ben's work history.
Yeah. So, and I've got some stuff I want to share with you. And let me share this first document. So this is what Ann and I tallied together. And we got this information because I did a public information request to the city of Eden for timesheets from the Eden Police Department, where Ben used to work before he was elected as Register of Deeds. And then he continued to do some work on the side, like a second job, which is awesome. I think everybody supporting the family should be cheered on. My issue was he was doing an awful lot of that work and getting paid for the second job while the Register of Deeds office was open and we were paying him to do that job. So for me, that's double dipping. But within that, we also needed information from the Eternal Register of Deeds Google Calendar. And Ann asked Mr. Curtis for a copy of that, and he declined to give it to us. But we kept asking around to other people that had access to it until we find somebody that would give it to us. So we used those two documents, and this is where we discovered that in the first 2 years, he had missed 103 days combined in those 2 years. And 25 of those days, or a 5-day work week, 5 weeks in 2 years, he got paid for 2 jobs at the same time.
Right. Yeah, and we know for fact that he went on a lot of trips, which is fine. Everybody deserves that. But in his first 2 years in office, he went to Europe, I think it was 3 weeks, and he went to Africa, and he went to football games, Washington, and so forth. I mean, good for him, but it was all when the office was open.
Right. And so the next document I want to show people is the document where he did sign in January 29th, 2019. He signed a letter where he gave up the right, or he opted out of earning vacation and sick days as an employee of the county. And so it's been presented as though he gave it back. The problem is you can't give back more than you had a right to take in the first place, right? This isn't about him giving back to us as much as him relieving himself of the obligation of having to answer to anyone. But he always has to answer to the voters. And so that's why we think it's important for everybody to have this information.
Right. So in summary, he missed 103 days in his first 2 years of work days, which means that he missed the equivalent of about 1 day every week.
Right. So let's talk about the commissioners, which is ultimately still talking about Mr. Curtis because the misuse of funds was in giving him raises.
Right. And again, the commissioners are responsible for giving the raises. He started on December 5th of 2016 when he was elected at $63,000. That was his salary. What is significant is 2 years later, Commissioner Travis got an email or sent an email to the other commissioners. Basically, there it is, urging that they make sure that newly elected people don't get a salary of the outgoing person who has seniority. What spearheaded this was what many people will remember. In Guilford County, they elected a new sheriff who ended up with the same salary as the old sheriff. So Commissioner Travis was trying to make sure this didn't happen. But 3 days
It didn't happen. But 5 days later, they
right.
after Travis sent that email out, 5 days later, they gave Mr. Curtis a raise to match the interim director who had been there for 16 years. So then they did exactly what his email was a concern to make sure didn't happen here.
Actually, if you look at the figures, and I won't bore you with those, they gave him more than she was getting.
Right.
They actually gave him more. And previous to that, he had gotten a merit raise, but that's not an issue for me.
Except I would point out on the merit raise is how longevity pay builds up. So, yeah.
Right. So at any rate, right in this time frame, Amy Simpson got an email from the UNC School of Government saying that the incoming Register of Deeds does not need to be paid what a previous Register of Deeds was paid. That legally there was no obligation for him to be matched. And that's there are laws about salaries, but that's clear that they did not need to match his salary. I have to add that several days after they gave him this salary correction, where they actually increased his salary by over $3,000. They raised his salary at that point. But then they gave him almost $10,000 of back pay. So they were trying to make that raise retroactive. So he got a lump sum of almost $10,000, which they later figured out they did not need and should not have given to him. So he volunteered, or we've been told, to return that money in payments over 21 months. So effectively, we gave him an interest-free loan for 21 months because he was able to pay off his bills with the almost $10,000 that he got in cash.
Right. And I just want to point out, I've seen on social media a few times people saying he paid back the raise. He did not pay back the raise. He paid back the back pay.
That's
the
correct.
raise he kept. In fact, they legally couldn't take the raise back from him on that.
Right. But then what I find even more interesting is if with all of that going on, 6 months later, on 7/1 of 19, the commissioners gave him a third raise, the merit raise being the first one.
Right.
And this one was for another over $4,000. So he started at $63,000. 2.5 years later, he's at $73,200, and he received a lump sum of almost $10,000, which he has paid back, but it was an interest-free loan.
Right.
So to me, that's mismanagement of funds, because basically they gave significant raises that were not legally required to someone who missed 103 days in the office.
Right. Yeah. It's good to have a childhood best friend as the county commissioner deciding to give you raises, but he's only one of the 5 votes. But anyway, so let's talk about from that point, because Amy Simpson had gone to work as a senior deputy director for the Board of Elections, when she found out that they had misinterpreted, I'll be generous, a law. I'm saying generous because one of the commissioners is a lawyer. So, so they then started going after her, and that's when the attacks started on the Board of Elections. And Anna, you've done more research on that than me. Yeah,
and that's the retaliation that I was seeing is what got me so interested in getting all these data and looking at all this information. Again, Amy had the letter that she sent out in December of 18 where she got the email back that you've already shown. I think they were retaliating because she found out that they should not have given, or they weren't legally required to give Mr. Curtis the raise that he got, or the raises. In March of 19, there was a letter from the Republican Party signed by all but one of the commissioners and all of the, almost all the elected Republican leaders, as well as the Republican Party, basically saying that Amy should be fired because she had run in a partisan race. And I'll remind the listeners that she had run against Mr. Curtis for Register of Deeds, and he won.
Right.
Tina Cardwell, who was the director, talked to the Human Resources, and this was not a fireable offense. She did not fire Amy. After that, I feel like they retaliated against the whole department, not just to Ms. Simpson. Good example is the budget meeting for the 1920 budget. They grilled Tina Cardwell for 30 minutes. I mean, grilled her. Pull up the video from that meeting if you don't believe it. It's incredible to watch what they did. And then to see, for instance, Mr. Curtis come in and they're like, hi, yes, we got your budget. Very good.
Right. She was treated very differently. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when they finalized the budget, they basically cut almost all of their overtime pay. They reduced their temporary salaries. They have to have temp workers during elections, and they cut that salary in half. They took out all the election precinct staff salary and said they'd have to ask for that later. The most interesting to me is what's called shared savings. And without going into details on what that is, every government department has shared savings that they save up, kind of like bonuses for their department that they can spend on things they need. Like, I think some departments might buy a vehicle if they get enough money, or I know that the Board of Elections was saving up to buy some special equipment for the election. At any rate, they took all 11,000 of the accrued shared savings away from the Board of Elections. No other.
I could jump in on that, and their excuse that they use for that is when the commissioners wanted to fire Amy Simpson, and they learned that they couldn't because the Board of Elections is an independent agency. They then said, "Oh well, if they're independent, then they shouldn't be participating in the county shared savings." Here's the problem with that. That same law that makes the Board of Elections independent also makes the Sheriff's Department and the Register of Deeds office independent,
right?
Because those two are their leaders are elected. So,
right.
But they didn't take it from them. They only took it from one, even though that law affects three.
Yes, right. And then this sounds trivial, but they took their TV away, and they're the only, every department, every single governmental agency has access to television, except now the Board of Elections. Let me just quickly say there was other bullying examples, and we really don't have time to go into all of it, but briefly, Tina was chastised by the Republican Party at a commissioner meeting because there had been a housewarming on staff time. I went and looked at least 10 examples I can give you of government employees having government parties, like a wedding shower or retirement party, on government property, on government time. So why they're picking on her, I don't know.
I think you do know. I think you do know.
Well, to me, it looked like they were singling her out and picking on that department.
Right.
And then, of course, the Republican Party took the board chairman of the Board of Elections to task. They filed a complaint against him. And, I think it's interesting, a school board member, our county commissioner, and our county attorney all went to Raleigh to testify against him, and he was exonerated.
Right.
Any rate,
right.
they also,
so look, here's the thing, everybody. There's a lot of information, and we really want you to go read it for yourself. So there's going to be a link attached to this video that we're sending out. We want you to look at the information for yourself. Don't trust us. Go look at it yourself. Unfortunately, when it got scanned in, it scanned in sideways. So just, look at it that way. Anyway, thank you all. We do want to say as well, I'm running for office, as is Ann, and our campaign committees are paying for this. So I have to say that half of this has been paid for from the Elect Wally White committee.
And the other half is paid for by the committee to elect Ann Brady. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Bye.